As you heard, today's theme is Disrupt, Challenge the Status Quo. It's a fitting theme to welcome Travis Mason, a leading industry thinker at X. The innovations taking place at X to advance next-generation technologies embody disruptive thinking. We are excited to have one of our region's very own graduates returning to inspire our audience to think big about how intentional disruption can positively impact their own industries. Mason brings a unique approach to solving complex policy challenges for X, working with industry leaders to tackle some of the world's most challenging problems through technology. For the last 5 years, he has focused on Google's most innovative work in autonomous technology, such as self-driving cars, and renewable energy innovations, such as airborne wind turbines. Before Google, he worked at Booz Allen Hamilton on government technology solutions for senior leaders in the Departments of Homeland Security, Defense, and State. In addition to his undergraduate degree at Syracuse University, he received a master's degree in public policy from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. He has also studied at Princeton University's Woodrow Wilson School of Public Policy and Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government as a Galbraith Scholar. Please join me in welcoming Travis Mason.
You got the juice. The juice to succeed is locked up inside all of us. We all want to thrive, we all want to wake up, seize the day, and change the status quo. But change comes with pressure. And when that pressure tightens, it's easy for us to do a right thing in the wrong way. The change becomes so important that we skip, we cheat, we leap ahead, often leaving key people and breakthrough ideas on the table. History is a reminder that not all change is growth, as not all movement is forward. I spend about 50% of my time now at Google between Mountain View, California and Washington, D.C. And the other day when I came back 2 weeks ago, one of my colleagues said, "Hey man, how's everything going?" And we were just kind of talking, shooting the breeze. And he asked me about the projects that I've worked on at Google. And I can't go through all of them because some of them we don't talk about, but I will go through just some of them briefly. So I started to talk to him about the self-driving car project, which many of you have probably seen on the news. I started to talk to him about the smart contact lens on the bottom right-hand side. That is a contact lens that is 2,000 times the circuitry, 2,000 times smaller than the circuitry in your phone. And it is a contact lens that allows diabetics to measure their glucose levels through their tears. Pretty cool innovation. On the bottom left, you'll see a drone delivering a package. So I also work on self-flying technology. How can we advance the next generation of aviation technology? And then in the top left-hand side, you'll see somewhat of we call it an energy kite, and it generates twice as much energy and removes 90% of the mass of a conventional wind turbine. Really cool stuff. All stuff that takes a lot of work with regulation, with industry, and that's my role at Alphabet or Google. So as we were discussing, all the research and things that I work on, I was telling him about the new senior role that I took at Google X and how I am a non-engineer on the engineering team now, which is pretty fun. And after we got done with the conversation, he said, "Man, you got the juice." I didn't know what he meant, but it sounded cool, so I felt good about having the juice. I didn't know whether it was a bad baseball reference or if it was a reference to the Buffalo Bills running back from 1969. I said, "Thanks, bro," anyway, because it was from one of the coolest people at the office I know. So was like, I got the juice. But I wasn't too sure, so I sent a text message off to my cooler friends to see what all of this was about. And they got back to me. They said, hey, man, it's all good. It means you're the man. You got it going on. It's an achievement that you won through a lot of yield and effort. And although I really don't agree with that, it was a good compliment for me to take. And my chest got a little bit higher. But I'm a curious guy, so I wondered where this reference came from. And in reality, this reference comes from a movie called Juice that's about 4 African-American teenage boys living in the city of Harlem. Like us, they all have dreams. They all have things that they wanted to do that was bigger than themselves. The main character, Q, wanted to be more than just a local DJ in Harlem. He wanted to be bigger than the small corner of New York City. And when all these guys got together, all they talked about, whether it was good or bad, was their dreams. But in Harlem, New York, where you have law enforcement around 24/7, where neighborhood gangs are taking over, it's very easy for those young men to do a right thing in the wrong way. And that's what happened. So in order to gain respect, Q and his buddies decide to rob a convenience store. One of his buddies shot the convenience store owner, murdered him. And the movie continues, bad decision after bad decision. When the pressure mounted for Q and his boys to do a good thing, to pursue their dreams, the shortcut was very convenient. They lost respect for the process. They did a right thing in the wrong way. And the story ends with 4 words. You got the juice now. 5. Surrounded by a group of neighborhood kids, Q hears from this young man, you got the juice now. And instead of responding like I did to my colleague, he shook his head. He rejected it. He didn't want to be the man. He didn't want the juice. Because by this moment, Q had lost 2 of his buddies to violence, with the other one critically in the hospital. Q had seen the result of what happens when we go about the right thing in a wrong way. He saw the collateral damage of blind success, and Q now understands that not all change is growth, as not all movement is forward. And the world of Q and his 3 buddies is not unfamiliar to me. I grew up in a rough neighborhood in southeast Washington, D.C., and if I'm honest, many of my friends and my family members did the right things in wrong ways. And you don't have to be a kid in southeast Washington, D.C. or Harlem, New York to understand the pressure that comes when we have a dream. When the desire to change is great, we push towards it with reckless abandon. The consequences ahead pale in comparison to the change we hope to see. So we skip. We push ahead regardless, often leaving key people and breakthrough ideas again on the table. The goal becomes so important that we check our brains and our character at the door. The reality of poverty and joblessness is easy to see outside these doors. There are bright spots, but the pressure is on us, and it's tightening every single day. And in that environment, it's easy for us to do the wrong thing in the right way, or the right thing in the wrong way. And it's easy for us to win at all costs. So if our goal is to grow, if our intent is to disrupt, if we want to change the status quo, then we have to remember that not all change is growth, as not all movement is forward. We talk about pressure being a good thing, too. I remember the other day I was watching the men's basketball team against the Cavaliers, and they were down 35-21. And a game-time decision to add just a little bit of pressure to the game for a couple minutes led us to the Final Four. The Orange took advantage of the pressure. They didn't let the pressure take advantage of them. I'm so glad to be here, and I'd like to thank Rob and his team, Ben and Krista, for the invitation. And I'm seriously humbled to be before you. You know, I recognize that the problems that you all have, the work that you want to do, won't get solved in one speech. And I'm just so humbled to be here because you all do the hard work. You all are on the forefront of this change. So today I'm not going to talk about the cool stuff at Google X. I want to more so focus on 5 questions. 5 questions to help us take advantage of the pressure and not let the pressure take advantage of us. 5 questions that I've seen in my short time at Google, across the federal government, and in other private sector companies that help change when change is difficult. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to innovation. So instead of getting in the weeds, I want to pop the discussion up a bit to talk about principles. Principles that drive innovation, principles that disrupt the status quo. Because again, not all change is growth, as not all movement is forward. The first question, are we willing to reverse our assumptions? One of the luckiest things that I have is, I live very close to my best friend and his family, and often spend some time with his two boys, one's 6 and one's 8. And whenever I go over there, they're always on their phone. And my assumption is that they're playing a video game. But usually I'm wrong. One time I asked Mason, Mason, come here, let me see what you're doing. He was on YouTube watching other people play games. Now, that baffled me a little bit because when I was his age, we were fighting over joysticks and the position in front of the TV when we played video games. But this guy and his little brother, they were on YouTube. Now gamers are people who play games and people who watch people play games. In fact, there's a platform that Amazon purchased for nearly $1 billion where people watch other people play games. How many of you heard of the platform called Twitch? Definitely not many people. Every day, nearly 800,000 people log on to Twitch to watch folks around the world play video games. Every game you can imagine sits on this platform, and it's not unusual for thousands of people to be watching one stream, and it's also not unusual for people to make money off this platform. There are people who are not only making living wages, but people are making $500,000 playing video games every single day. It's a new world, and it happened by reversing a deeply held assumption in gaming. You see, gaming was all about the participant, and the innovation in the gaming industry was about the person holding the joystick, the person playing the video game. Twitch reversed it a little bit. Twitch asked the question, and they said, what if we innovated for the person who's the spectator? What if we innovated on the person who was watching the game? And it worked. And the viewership at any given moment is bigger than CNN, Headline News, and E! Network. Is there anything in the planning that you all are discussing that can be reversed? Is there an assumption that we can turn on its head? If it's online, can we take it offline? If it's usually purchased out of house, can we build it in-house? If it's seasonal, can we make it all seasons? Sometimes breakthrough ideas and disruptions arise when we remove the deeply held beliefs in our industry. Are you willing to reverse the assumptions? Do we have an unlikely team? I grew up with really, really bad allergies, and it was always the pollen through the cut grass that messed me up. But my grandfather didn't care. Every day during the summer months, I go out with him and we go to the church that my great-grandfather founded, and we clean the baseboards, we mop, we vacuum, and we cut the grass. One time it got so bad that my mom took me to the doctors. She didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. It happened to be an allergy towards pollen. Well, my grandfather didn't care despite her desire for me to stop cutting grass. And I'll never forget the day where I got in the car and he handed me a pair of goggles and a dust mask and told me to get to cutting the grass. He never let my allergies get in the way of hard work. All of us have allergies. It may not be pollen, it may not be ragweed, it may not be dust, but it's towards people and the ways that are different than us, that are counter to our own. Psychologists actually call these things social allergens. He gets on my nerves. He gets under my skin. He's thinking about this the wrong way. She's driving me crazy. Social allergens produce distance. What we don't like, we separate ourselves from. Researchers at Stanford actually wanted to figure out what made their entrepreneurs great that came and graduated from their class. So they gathered a sample of 1,700 entrepreneurs that have graduated from Stanford Business School. And they ranked them by things like number of patents, number of new products, whether they exploited new markets, and whether they discovered new ways to market. A ton of variables. The only variable that mattered was diversity. Entrepreneurs who spent more time with diverse networks of strong and weak ties of families, friends, business colleagues, and even complete strangers were 3 times more likely to innovate. 3 times more likely to innovate than entrepreneurs who stuck with the uniform network. They also found that weak ties with different people were stronger than strong ties with people who are just like us. This study reminds us that as we think about change, as we think about moving forward, it's not just the presence of difference and diversity that matters. It's also the proximity of difference and diversity that matters. How close is difference to the center of the action? You know, I used to believe that you could tell a lot about a leader by looking at his or her Rolodex. That's only one half of the story. But it's more than that. It's about the frequently called contacts. Who's on that list? Who's in your inner circle? In my job, I really don't get the luxury of choosing the coalition that I work with. When you think about building the next generation of aviation, it's going to take laws from the municipal level, state level, federal level, international level. It's going to take regulators across the board. Many agencies that you would think FAA, DHS, DOD, Department of Interior, the White House, and the many agencies within that. It's going to take discussions with the public, and it's going to take the support of a pretty diverse industry. I have no choice but to be close to people who are different than me. There is no future without collaboration, and there is no innovation without an unlikely mix of interests at the decision table. The more game-changing the disruption, the more diverse the team must be. Are we thinking small to win big? How many of you saw the Oscars this year? Chris Rock started off the Oscars, and he's one of the funniest people on the planet. And so after he finished, I was super curious about his process. I'm a curious guy, so I dug a little bit, and I was surprised at what I found. In the process of developing his routine, Chris Rock makes a ton of little bets. Before his latest global tour, or even before we see him on the Oscars, he appeared nearly 50, 60, 70 times in front of a comedy club that's literally right next door to his home. And he goes there unannounced. People usually don't know. And he gets on stage with a legal pad of ideas, of jokes, hundreds of them. Some of them fail, and many who are in the audience call it rough. But what he's doing is he's developing the big bet by little bets. As he's making jokes, he's actually looking at people's reactions. He's testing whether or not it's funny. By the time we see him in a big tour, and by the time we see him on the stage at the Oscars, those jokes have been tested, prototyped in a small form. A bunch of small decisions lead to big opportunity. As you all think about your plans, do they include enough little bets? You know, I'm a non-engineer working on an engineering team, and I'm often surprised at the very detailed versions of what we work on from an engineering perspective. They're not just looking at the big goal, they're looking at the little small goals. In fact, when you download an app on your cell phone, you might see version 3.01.05.02. Well, that's a part of a longer process that's mapped out. It's a bunch of little bets hidden in the big bet. Little bets help us move forward, help us move faster to our desired end without getting stymied by perfection or excessive planning. Are we thinking small to win big? Next question, is our song in tune? You know, most people are surprised when I tell them at one point I was singing opera and playing classical music. I even came to Syracuse on a music scholarship and spent most of my adolescent years in some of the best schools, best performing arts schools in Metro DC. When people find out, the first question to me is, are you still singing? Are you still doing your music? Usually I answer no, but lately I've been answering yes. Because just like a musician, a leader does a lot of pitching and a lot of tuning of that pitch. A song is a pitch about a great idea. It's the process of translating an idea using sounds and lyrics. Great music can have us singing even when we don't agree with the tune. We hum the brilliant melody line or repeat such a good job at distilling down a big idea. Artists can capture our heart even if we're not fully brought into his or her idea. That's really the job of a leader, to get people singing even when they aren't fully on board, to make the melody line so clear, to make the promise undeniable, to get people humming the tune. And that takes a lot of work. Some musicians work months, sometimes years, on songs and lyric lines. Like Chris Rock, they are constantly testing the message, reshaping the lyrics, all with the goal to get everyone singing the same tune. Change efforts demand constant tune. It's a job that requires 24/7 translating. You know, as I said, I'm a senior lead on an engineering team, and I'm a non-engineer. My job is to help shape the future of public policy for some of the most innovative projects, one of the most innovative companies on the planet. Like many of you, I constantly find myself lodged between two interests that speak two very different languages. Actually, maybe the same word, but the meaning from each side is very different. The public's perspective on what we're working on is very different than the engineer's perspective. The regulator's language may be a bit different than the engineer's and the innovator's language. And the industry view of progress is almost always different than the government's view of progress. If I'm not constantly tweaking the message, paying close attention to the language, change is incredibly difficult. The research suggests in large organizations, and we used to say this a lot at Booz Allen, 70% of change efforts fail. Main reason? Communication. I'm not married, but the research says that the main reason divorce happens is communication. As we think about these plans, are we fine-tuning our message? Is our message being translated to everyone, or just some people? And lastly, are we being humble enough? You know, there's a book by Jim Collins called Good to Great. And the book was an exercise to separate the good companies from the great companies. It's very research-based. They went and they looked at over 1,700 companies. And they looked for two things. They wanted to know whether the companies had sustained mediocre success for more than 15 years. And they wanted to know whether after that 15 years they experienced turnaround that beat their opponents 2.8 percentage points, 2 times more than their competitors. There weren't a lot of companies that qualified for that out of the 1,700. Actually, there were only 11. And when they discovered this, Jim Collins told his research team, I want you guys to look for everything except for the leadership answer. Because he didn't believe leadership made a difference between the good companies and the great companies. He actually thought leadership was such a black box that we use it to explain so much in business that he was not interested in the leadership idea. But as they dug deeper on the 11 companies, they found that leadership was one of the most important points. He calls them level 5 leaders, people who have an unnatural mix of humility and diligence to get the job done. Level 4 leaders have all that except the humility. We often hear about the level 4 leaders, but we rarely hear about the level 5 leaders. Are we being humble enough as we go throughout change? Because that's the most important thing. That's going to separate our change from being good to great. You know, I grew up in a family full of faith, and there was always a saying around that if you want God to laugh, tell him your plans. Plans change whether you believe in God or not. Sadly, I was just talking to a friend of mine in the back, Michelle Walker, who is so integral to my success at Syracuse, Don Dorr, also many people in this room who I didn't get the chance to see who were integral to my success at Syracuse. I was talking to Michelle, and we were talking about one of the people that we mutually knew. And in the back, just moments before, she said she had so many plans in retirement. Just found out her husband had pancreatic cancer. And that's a very somber reminder that plans change. Things shift. Even the plans that we have strategically aligned for the goal. I'll tell you this, the last thing this kid from the ghettos of DC would imagine would be working on technology, the most innovative technology at Google. My plans changed, my interest grew in another area, and I became a part of something much bigger than myself. And in my journal, I wrote something like that similar that I want to read really quickly to you all. I was saying to myself, I said, I'm glad I changed my plans. They were too small anyway. I'm glad my interest grew in other areas. It revealed more about my gifts and my uniqueness than my original plan ever did. I'm glad I decided to be a part of something much bigger than what I had in mind. It's really what led me before you here today. And if we can hop in a time machine to the year 2050, when Central New York is more than what we imagine it to be, I hope we'll look back and say, I'm sure glad we were flexible enough to change our plans. They were too small anyway. I'm glad our interests grew beyond what we had planned. It revealed more about who we are than our original plans did. And I'm glad we decided to be a part of something much bigger than ourselves and than what we had in mind. Thank you all for inviting me today. I hope these 6 questions enable you to think very differently about disrupting Central New York. God bless you all, and thank you.